In this episode, we're going to make a deck rail garden planter. So we're going to be able to utilize these planter buckets that usually end up getting thrown away. I'm going to be using reclaimed wood. I've got some 3 pieces of cedar here, 1x6, cut at 19 inches, a reclaimed 2x4, cut at 19 inches, and just a couple supports to give it strength so it doesn't break with the weight of the plants. So with that said, let's get dirty. So we're going to utilize 3 of these planter buckets, and we're going to have to cut some holes for these buckets to go into. Now, I'm going to be using the 4-inch hole, and you can't really measure them going this way, but if you measure it this way, if you go inside, you can get a pretty accurate measurement of where that's going to sit once you put it in this 4-inch hole. So I already have my center line marked on this one here because this is the one that's going to be holding the planters. And I'm going to cut these 4-inch holes at 4 inches, 9.5, and 15. And that'll put them exactly where I want them to be. So let's take it over to the drill press and get these holes cut. So I have it lined up for the first cut. Now I have a piece of sacrificial wood under here. When I cut through, I don't want the blade to hit the metal table. So let's get the first hole cut. All right, so I got my 4-inch holes cut. Oh yeah, they're going to sit in there really nicely. So there we go. Now we can start assembling. Now I'm just going to use the pieces that I cut for supports just to get a finger measurement of exactly where I want this to be. So I'm kind of guiding it up here on the sides and then on the bottom where these supports are. So now that I have it where I want to get some clamps on there. Okay, so now that I have it clamped where I want it, I need to make a mark about the center of this piece right here on the back side. So once I have that, I know where my center is. Now I'm going to set it down, and I want to make sure that I don't put screws that come all the way through these holes here. So I'm just going to, by sight, put a cross line where I'm going to be putting the screws into the solid areas here. So now that I have my marks on the sides, I'm going to take a measurement where the center line, where I drew these center marks here, and I'm getting about 2 1/4. So now I can mark 2 1/4 on these 2 areas because my clamps are in the way to draw a perfectly straight line. So this is just another way to do it. All right, so I have all my 2 1/4 marks. So I'm going to pilot hole those 4 holes and then countersink them. Now I'll throw some 1 5/8 inch deck screws in there. With 2 screws in, I can remove the clamps. And voila, we have the front part done. Now we're going to go ahead and put the supports on. So I flipped it upside down. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the supports. I'm going to put them where I want them and just kind of eyeball and mark the middle. Okay, so now that I have the middle line marked, I'm just going to put a mark right about here by sight of where I want the screw. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I'm going to add some glue, small little bit of glue, and then clamp this piece here. I got to make sure that I'm either above or below my mark for putting the pilot hole in. Okay, rinse and repeat for the other side. So the next step, I'm going to put 2 pilot holes here on the top to go into my supports. All right, so I have my supports on. Now I want to attach it to this 2x4, and I'm going to put a bead of glue up here at the top and then clamp it onto the 2x4. So now I need to make my marks for the screws, and I'm going to use a combination square set at 3/4 of an inch. That is the halfway point of a 2x4. So this way I can make sure I have a nice straight screw line. Now when I make these marks, I'm actually going to make them right over the top of the holes. That way, when you put the pots in, it's going to hide these screws. And then I'm going to go ahead and pilot hole those in. Now I'm going to be using 2 1/2 inch screws versus the 1 5/8 that I was using before. So the last part of the assembly, I want to attach this piece to the 2x4. So I'm going to need a glue line. Again, I still have the combination square set for 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to make 4 marks on this one. All right, so one thing I should have done is right after I cut the 4-inch holes, I should have done the round over on them. Looking now, I am going to run into a problem getting this little corner here, but I can just do it by hand. So do the round over before you attach this piece. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to sand the bejesus out of this thing. Okay, so I have the sanding complete. The last step I'm going to do is apply the finish. I'm going to put a spar urethane on this. Now, if your deck rail is wider or smaller than a 2x4, then you make the appropriate calculations there and cut what you need. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put probably a couple holes about 3/4 of an inch down from right here. And that way, if I put the planters in there and it kind of leans forward, like it doesn't sit right, I can push it down and put 2 screws in to the rail itself, and that will hold it perfectly steady. So I'm going to apply the finish and catch you in a minute. So like I said, I'm going to be putting an oil-based spar urethane on here. I do have it in a spray can. If you don't have the spray can, that's fine. Go ahead and apply it by hand with a brush. So there we go. Just throw this over the railing on your deck, and you've got yourself a beautiful deck rail garden planter. You've recycled the buckets that came with some of the plants you've purchased. This is a quick and fairly easy project. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe. Until next time, keep it safe.